Today, we sat down with Sohail Chatur, one of TNT's performance managers, to lay out how you can actually go from 100K a month in ad spend to $1.5 million. And this isn't theory. We dive into the changes he made to drive performance. And his answers weren't about budget or audience or any of the stuff you'd expect. Sohail discusses how his background as a copywriter now helps him effectively run creative teams and strategy for accounts spending over $1 million a month. And in this episode, we go into everything from the environment he cultivates to get the most out of our fully remote team to what makes unique creative type he calls toppers different and how they help 15x one brand using them. It's the conversation you'd want to eavesdrop on in a conference bar, except we recorded it. So stick around because we're about to get into the insights that can drive better performance for your business today. Let's get into it. I know you went from being a copywriter to managing some pretty big accounts. I think we got accounts spending over $1.5 million a month. So yeah, doing at least 2 million in revenue. And, just curious, like what was the biggest blind spot when switching from copywriter to, managing accounts?
I think the biggest blind spot you're going to have is you always tend to lean on your strengths really heavily. So for the most part, when I went, because my background's as a copywriter and now managing accounts, teams, all of that, naturally I'm going to rely more on copy than everything else. So my biggest blind spot was just not recognizing other levers to pull in order to help scale these accounts faster and more effectively. So I was always like, we need more we need more new creative, we need more hooks, we need more formats. I would always lean more heavily on the copywriters than I would on other parts of the team because I knew what they could do and I knew how I know how to pull the copy lever. So One of the things I learned inheriting someone else's account is how he scaled an offer to 600K a month in spend with nothing but scroll stoppers and some static images. And they scaled really profitably, really well with just 3-second clickbaits stuck on the front of winners.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to learn how to do more of that.
Yeah, well, the iterative side of it, I mean, man, first of all, like what you're saying really resonates with me because I was doing copy and I was just like so systematic about it. I wanted to operationalize everything. That's how I became the head of the creative operations to kind of manage the department. And then from there, being that I was a manager, I was like having to kind of track things and analyze a little bit more. And that was my natural progression into managing accounts as well, and how I became a performance manager, which is what you're doing now. And so that iterative side of things and exercising those new muscles and learning to work with others to figure out how to strengthen your weaknesses really resonates with me. So yeah, that hits home. Good answer.
Yeah, and I'm curious about those other levers that you're talking about. So what are some of the other levers that we should be pulling?
There's definitely one of the things TNT specifically is really good at is finding ways to make use of the same asset in different ways and repurpose it. So taking an existing hook that's working on one ad and then putting it on other winners, taking a clickbait that we found that works and putting that on winners, finding buried hooks inside an ad and pulling those out to the front and really drawing that attention. So there's a lot of things that we do that I haven't really seen done in a lot of other places that I think has been really useful.
Most other places focus on net new creative. It's kind of that like analytical framework that you mentioned is I think something that kind of sets us apart. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, we have so much data to work with that allows us to pull so much more out of our existing creative. Like just because like one ad dies does not mean it's dead. It just means it's going to be resurrected in like 30 different new forms.
So when you're looking at the data, like let's say you're preparing for Monday meeting, best ads meeting where we talk about the ads from the previous week. What are you thinking about? How are you approaching those meetings with your team that really set the tone for the rest of the week and set you up for the next month?
I think typically what I do when I'm preparing for those meetings is obviously before the call, I look at the data, I look what's working, what's not working. I look for things to prioritize. And we can't talk about everything because we run so many tests and we run so many ads. And, if you have 6 offers that are all spending mid 6 figures to low 7, you're not going to have the ability to talk about every ad that was tested. So obviously prioritizing is a big part. But when we come into the call, it's less about that. And it's more about just how do I create the best possible environment in that meeting to generate the best ideas. Because at the end of the day, like, I'm the performance manager, I'm not the performance maker. I have to make sure we get the best out of the team. I'm not the one carrying the ship. I'm just the one pointing and being like, let's go that way. So really, the main thing I'm just looking for in that is, can we make that call structured in such a way that I get the best possible ideas out of the team that then set us up? And I feel like, I mean, Kira, you've been in a lot of those. I hope I'm even remotely successful at doing that, because the ideas come from the copy team. It comes from everywhere too. It comes from the editor. Sometimes it comes from the media buyer. So just creating that environment is really what I care about more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you do an amazing job. That's why I think whatever you're doing to bring out the best of your team is working. And I'd love to drill down more into those ingredients too, because I think this is one of your gifts as a performance manager.
Thank you. Yeah, we can dive into that, or however you guys want to take this.
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to ask, is like, we're a fully remote agency. We don't ever get to sit down in the same room and work on stuff together as a team. So in terms of cultivating that environment that brings out the most in copywriters, or brings out the most in your team in general, like, one of the things that I know that I've observed on a remote team is that people will often come to calls and just be silent. And so what exactly are you doing to cultivate that environment of openness, creativity, make sure everyone's contributing, and really get everything you can out of it?
I try to not take myself too seriously. Like, I make fun of myself. I'm pretty self-deprecating. I like make jokes. I try to make the environment very casual, because I don't want anyone to feel like their ideas are stupid. And I don't want anyone to feel scared that when they have an idea, especially if they're speaking up for the first time, that they're going to get shot down. And if most of that call is very casual and everyone's comfortable, then no one's going to feel on the spot. No one's going to feel like there's any bad ideas here. The point is, like, yeah, I'm just trying to get that out of the team, because the best ideas sometimes come from like the most innocuous discussions, or the seed of an idea is there from the most like casual comment. And so I want as much of that spontaneity and serendipity as we can create in that environment. Because at the end of the day, we're a data-driven company, but we're also a team of creatives. And so trying to find that balance is hard. And I'm not saying that my way is the best way, but it's the best way I know how to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned prioritization, and that is so hard when there's so many offers and ads and writers. How you're really good at this too. So how do you think about what to prioritize? Even when you receive all those ideas, maybe in that call, it's like now you have 20 ideas from the team. How do you decide what to execute on?
I think there's two questions there. So like, first, let's break them down. So like the first question was, how do I prioritize like what we talk about on the call? And I think a lot of that is really having a context of not only the team, but like also each individual offer that we're managing. Because, okay, let's say, this offer has been running really well with these 3 core winners, but they're starting to fatigue. We're seeing the underlying data like, hey, this isn't going to last much longer. We might want to put more effort into finding new variations of this. Hey, this other offer, the client said we were sunsetting, and then they managed to find like 6 figures worth of raw ingredients in their back of their warehouse that they're now turning into product. Okay, we need to ramp up creative production. So it's just about having context of sell is what we call our teams internally, pod, squad, team, whatever you want to call it. So having context of sell capacity, and then having context of each and every account, and based on that, figuring it out. So it's like kind of a mixture of like big picture, but also being in the weeds enough to know where we need to direct focus. And that's an imperfect art form. Like, I'm still learning how to do that. And then to answer your other question, which was, how do we prioritize after the call all of the ideas? For that, like, I'll be honest, like at the end of those calls, my brain is fried. I create the briefs for all of the different projects, and then I need like a day before I can prioritize. So like part of that is just like giving myself the time to like come back and be like, oh, this idea does not need to happen. Like, we can put this away. Or why did I create this brief like 3 times? I just wrote it 3 different ways. So a lot of it's like just giving yourself a little bit of a break to then figure out like, and priorities change day to day. So like even from, Monday afternoon to like Tuesday morning, things might change.
So, I would love to hear about your biggest win that you've had at TNT, like what you're most proud of so far.
That's a good one. Okay, I'll give you like the funny answer. I'll give you the real answer. The funny answer is I'm most proud of stealing copywriters from every other cell to come and do work for mine. I would say that's the biggest thing I'm most proud of. Um,
Hey, if you're able to pull it off, it means you're doing something right. So congrats.
yeah, I'm just like trying to do it in a way where like the other PMs don't find out and then hate me. It's like, hey, why is my capacity going? Like, why is our production going down? In terms of like the biggest accomplishment, I mean, I think, and like, I'll just say that. And again, these always sound so cringy, but like none of these are individual accomplishments. They're all team based. So the first client that we were able to take from what was essentially a failing offer, really struggling to spend even at low six figures, and being able to take that over the course of 4 months to spending $1.5 million was like a huge success, I feel like. Because of how many things, like it put into perspective just how many things have to go right for that to happen. It was not one thing. It was not one person. It definitely was not me. It was everything from working with the client on, can we create, can we revamp this VSL with a different expert? Can we change the problem mechanism to something that's a little bit more scary and engaging? Can we find new talent? Can we unlock new formats? So there were a lot of things that had to go right. But like the process of getting there was the success, not the actual end goal. Because our whole team grew so much in that process, and we all learned so much in that process. And so I would say that was the biggest success.
Yeah, the point that it's a team effort is super important. Performance managers in our company are that person who is touching kind of all the pieces that go into driving the performance for our clients. You're strategically delegating out those tasks. All of those things building up to that offer, doing the $1.5 million in those 4 months. It is a team success, but you got to have a level of pride that like you were steering the ship. There's also stuff on the client side too, right? Like their execution of, I think you said some of the like mechanism stuff or even the authority figure stuff, like, you know, their execution on that side based on your suggestions. Like there were so many variables, but yeah, man, congrats. That is a huge success.
Thank you. I mean, like I said, it was entirely the team. Like so much went into it. Like the writers put so much into it. Our producer created new formats on the fly in our studio shoots to make that work. Like expanding from like 100K a month to 1.5 million was so many people all rowing in the right direction to keep that ship analogy alive.
Dude, that's 15x. Like that's so big.
It was, and it was amazing, and so it was such a fun experience to be able to do
awesome.
that with everybody. It's like, again, like we're not saving lives here. We're not at war, but like when you do stuff like that and you feel like you're going into battle with your team every day, it definitely bonds you. So
yeah, cool.
What would you say to someone listening who's like, cool, I want to do that too? What I don't want to say it's a step-by-step process. It's not 1, 2, 3, but like, what would you prioritize or recommend they look at first to scale and do 15x?
Every offer is different, and everyone's going to have different needs. So I'd say in this case, you really have to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, because you're going to be leaning heavily on your strengths and your weaknesses are going to come to light in this process. So if you're really strong creatively, you're going to be leaning on that heavily. But if you're really weak on the media buy side, that will get exposed in the process of scaling. So being really self-aware, and self-aware not necessarily for yourself as an individual, but for your team's capacity and your strengths, that's really what is going to drive that success. And everything else comes out of that, right? Like if you're really good at analyzing a funnel, but you do not know how to delegate the processes of optimizing that funnel, you're not going to be able to scale. If you're really good creatively, but you can't buy media, you're not going to be able to scale. If you're really good at media, but like your VSL is underperforming, you're not going to be able to scale. So it's really about knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and knowing who to pull in to ask for help.
Yeah. Do you have a process for kind of attacking those weaknesses, or is it just more about kind of keeping a baseline awareness and leaning heavily on your subject matter expert that's doing more of the execution?
I think it goes back to that first question Kira asked about where my biggest blind spot was. And like definitely that came to light here, where I was like leaning really heavily on copy. But the biggest unlocks really came, at least in this experience, I can only speak for this one experience, understanding that I couldn't exclusively lean on copy forced me to understand how to lean on other things. And so it was
actual like skill development, or leaning on the person
Both.
that you know can handle that? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, both.
Both. Okay. Yeah.
So I think as a leader, and I'm not trying to sound preachy, but like as a leader, you need to constantly be upskilling and improving your own understanding, your own skill set, your own knowledge, because I don't know, maybe this is Pollyanna, but like I truly believe that leaders lead from the front. And I've worked under too many leaders who lead from way back and, yelling from the cheap seats. So I really put a lot of pressure on myself to like if there's a weakness, I want to be able to know what that weakness is, and I want to be able to know how to turn that into a strength before relying on experts, which again could be a bit of a hindrance. But that's just the way I lead, because I don't like ever want to ask anyone to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself.
Yeah, man. I asked that question specifically because there's this term that's floating around, and I think it's been around for a while, but I feel like it's getting more and more popular these days, a full stack marketer. And like, you have to be able to unpack it or define it. It's like, you have to be able to understand every single piece of all of the things that you're doing. So you can't just be a copywriter. You have to understand CRO. You have to understand media. You have to understand social ads and direct response ads and creator ads. And, all of those things are pieces of this big show, this industry that we work in. And so if you want to just be a copywriter, you're kind of kneecapping yourselves in terms of growth and what you can contribute to, because you're going to get to the point where we need to talk about CRO, but if you can't contribute to the conversation, well then like go off into your corner. And so that's why I think like for anyone listening, extracting that value out of like, what are my weaknesses, and go attack those weaknesses so that you can at least contribute to the conversation, even if you're not the person who's executing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I'm kind of lucky in that regard, because I get bored quickly. So I kind of always want to like learn something else and improve my skills here and there.
Yeah.
I have, I suffer from that same like entrepreneurial shiny object syndrome. So, but in this case, like being a PM, like it actually serves as an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage, because the more you kind of can be a generalist and understand multiple aspects of the marketing process at an above average level, even if you're not a master, but if you're above average at a lot of things, that serves the clients really well in this role. And I think I have an additional advantage because like, even when I became a copywriter originally, I always treated it as a tool, not a career. And it was a skill set I wanted to get good enough at so that I could use that to leverage my way into becoming more of a consultant, more of a decision maker, getting in the room with high level marketers. And so that kind of all came full circle when I came here.
So you're upskilling, you're focusing on weaknesses and strengths. And let's say you have the next offer that's doing 100K a month and wants to go to over $1 million a month. From your learnings, how are you approaching that next offer?
So the first thing I'm doing is I'm making sure that that funnel is locked in, because anything we throw at the front of that doesn't matter if we can't take full advantage of the traffic once it hits the landing page. Like if it's a leaky bucket, we got to plug those holes first. And I know some clients are really, one of the things I will say about like TNT is we attract really sophisticated, mature clients. And I don't mean mature in terms of age. I mean mature in terms of they just understand the game.
Yeah, sophisticated.
Yeah,
I think
they're
that's the
really
right word.
sophisticated. They're very patient. They understand, and they really lean on. They're all expert marketers in their own right, but they also lean on us as in our expertise, which I really appreciate. Some clients will want to scale with what they have, and part of kind of being the adult in the room here is saying, "Hey, look, we have some work to do first, because." We've got all these great ideas that we're ready to launch to drive traffic to your funnel, but you're going to let money walk out the door if you don't fix these things first. So that's like the number one thing I'm doing. Number two is making sure the entire team understands this offer like the back of their hand so that they can write for it effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part of that is we're not all writing the same format of ads. Like we're heavily prioritizing creative diversity. I want to see multiple faces. I want to see multiple formats. I want to see multiple camera angles. I want to see different types of B-roll. I want to see like as much different as we can do with different copy allows us to scale this a lot faster. So if we launch this the right way, we already have the assets in place to scale this to the moon. So that would be like my 3-step checklist. Get the funnel right, get the team like understanding the offer at a deep level, and 3 is creative diversity.
Okay, you get that all dialed in. It's a win. And let's talk about launching. You have done really well launching new offers. We've had a lot of success recently with a new offer. I'd love to hear about your approach when you're thinking strategically about a launch.
So I kind of want to double click into that because like we're talking about a launch. So this product has never been live before. Is that what you mean, Kira?
Yes, I have an example that we can't mention, but it was a recent launch that had huge success.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was a huge success. And so to the point that like there's so many other factors going into it, like they might not have had or they wouldn't have had any data that would have said like this is working. So when a client comes to us and say, here's our funnel, and Sohail, you were talking about analyzing the funnel to make sure that the funnel's dialed as like one of those 3 things. In this case, like it's a launch, so you don't know. I mean, they might have like email sends or some, kind of like surface level data that indicates that like things are dialed, but we don't really have any cold traffic data. And so when you're approaching a launch in that perspective of not like launching with a client that already has a funnel, but actually launching a new product, this is typically when we have a client that has something new that they want to bring to market.
I'm really glad you double clicked into that, because I think this is where having the previous experience as a copywriter really does help. Because yeah, if I have data, obviously it's a lot easier to make a decision and figure out where the leaky bucket is. But having like, prior to TNT, I also had like a career. So I launched, I've scaled a coaching program from literally 0 to 10 million a year. I took another client from the brink of bankruptcy to 3 million a year. I've written some of that copy, and I've been in the rooms where that copy was written, to do like $1 million day launches. So having that experience really helps here, because I can look at a funnel with no data and still tell you where things are going to fall apart. And so being able to look at that just with that experience that I've been able to draw on, allows me to tell the client, hey, like before we launch this, like fix these 3 things and we'll have a more successful launch. And so just bringing all of that together is the next step. Because we've analyzed everything, and then we bring that together, and then everyone kind of goes into their corners and does their thing. So they're writing, then we film, and then it goes to the editors. And like the fun part for me is like knowing that we got to get that thing launched. And so it's just really exciting to be able to manage all the pieces, like following up with the writers for their deadlines, coordinating those shoots, coordinating with the producers to get a shoot right at the time when the writers are able to get their scripts in, just gives us so much more ammo for an amazing launch. And then from there, it's working with our coordinator and our editing team to make sure everything's ready ahead of time. And then working with our media buyer to QA that funnel, make sure all of our tracking's in place, make sure all accounts are set up ready. So just all of those steps come together in a really nice way. So I don't know if that was helpful. I just kind of like went into how excited I am about this stuff.
So we talked about funnel and launching. We talked about some of the ops stuff and team. Like I wanted to get into some of the creative innovation stuff, because I know one of the case studies that you did earlier this year, I think it was actually for that brand that you were able to take from about 100K to 15x up to 1.5 million, was toppers. I used to say Frankensteining. I think the industry often talks about mashups, because I would think of a mashup of like, we have a bunch of assets. We're using owned media and maybe a little bit of stock and maybe some product shots or, whatever assets are available to us. We're using those and potentially doing just voiceover over the top of that. And it's just a mashup of that media. And then we can say whatever we want over the top of it. Then a Frankenstein, just to qualify terms for you. Mm-hmm. And then Frankensteining is like what you were saying of like taking those pieces, those winning pieces from those different ads, stitching them all together, and, using the audio. So that's kind of what I think of those 2 types of ad buckets, just to clarify. Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to get into. Is how is this different, and what makes it unique, and how did you use it to scale?
So I think it just depends on how you come to that topper. So Frankensteining or mashups, that typically happens when you have like an ad that you've already got that's won or that's been a proven winner, and you're just trying to refresh it. So you take pieces of it, or you cut off the first minute and you just stick it on something else, like a long hook. And I think that's kind of like how the industry approaches toppers, is like, we already have an existing ad. We're just taking out all the best parts and we're just using it as like an intro to something else. What we did differently for that launch is So this actually happened by accident. Funny enough. So one of our producers had rented this like really cool podcast setup, but it was like a specific like casual podcast inside. Instead of like the more Rogan-esque like red curtain. You got the headphones on. You got the mic.
Kind of like what you see like the comedy podcasts do. Like they're all sitting on the couch and yeah.
Like they got their cups of tea and they're talking, and it's like it's not very serious. It's not very structured.
Yeah.
The producer has some excess capacity for scripts, and like we're filming in 2 days. So I hit up one of my fastest copywriters, and I was like, hey, I have this idea. I don't think we have time to write a full net new in 2 days. Can you just write some things that are like a minute, like 30 seconds to a minute, that you can just put on top of our existing winners to keep them alive? And here are the ideas I have. Can you do it? And he was like, yeah, for sure. So it was really like, it was kind of like you get some of the best innovations from constraints, because if we had 2 weeks, I would have just been like, okay, I want like these 4 net new ideas. But because we had 2 days, I was like, just write 30 seconds to a minute to try and get this idea out as quickly as possible. And I want like these 4 ideas. And then they just killed it. Like one of those, I think, scaled to like 300K in additional spend just on top of one ad. So like one topper on one video, we were able to just scale that like crazy. And from there, I was like, okay, we're probably onto something here. Let's try that again. So then we just started filming more of these types of toppers. And they were like, some of them are skits. Some of them are these podcast style openings that kind of like they lay the framework for the authority figure in the main ad. And I think people like the fact that like there's borrowed authority when like 2 people are talking about, hey, did you see this thing? This thing is really cool. And then all of a sudden this thing shows up and you get to watch it. So I think it just works because psychologically people, especially like, our generation is now scrolling through YouTube shorts and reels and TikToks. Like they want to see a different face every 30 seconds. So just being able to build that in really helps. Because if you do it every 5 seconds, it's a little bit like, you almost know it's an ad, but for 30 seconds and then it switches to something else, it actually feels a little bit more organic. And like mimicking that organic content feel is huge.
Yeah. That 5-second change up is like what I would think of the organic, or the like UGC mashup, where let's say you've got a whole bucket of testimonials or creator content, and you take like one sentence from each person and you stitch them all together, and it's like coherent, but it's not like one person ever talking continuously.
Yeah, and we've seen success with that too. Like, we've seen a good amount of success with that as well.
Yeah,
but
it sounds different. Like the topper is a unique asset that's just being connected onto the full ad. You're not replacing the hook. You're not replacing a body section or, lead section of a creative to refresh it. You're actually totally combining 2 things together, and with intention, to the extent that it sounded like you were talking about in this podcast topper, that it actually set up the video that's coming after it, talking about it directly, not trying to flow into the ad. And then it flows into the ad. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Dude, that's super unique.
It literally sets up like the end line of the winning topper set up the opening line of the winning ad that came behind it.
Yeah, that finally just clicked for me. I know I should have known this, and I, when we're on team calls and stuff like that, and we talk about toppers, I actually asked this question because I was confused. Like I was like, how is this different from Frankensteining or mashups or whatever? But now it like fully clicked, and I think that's super unique to say like. And now it's almost like it reminds me of those videos where it's like incoming stitch, where like something happens and it's connected to something else, where it's almost a reaction video or something like that. Not exactly that, but that kind of a thing where like it's 2 assets connected together.
So we're actually testing that format as well. So I'll have to come back and tell you how that goes.
Can we break it down even more, where maybe for someone who's never written one, or maybe a performance manager who wants their team to create these, and they're like, okay, cool, I get that there's 2 of these, we're stitching them together, it's short, we're going to lend credibility to the authority. What other guidance would you give them, or maybe even a writer on your team who's never written one?
I'll give you like what I think makes a good topper, just based on seeing so many across the agency. The formats have to be very different. And by formats, I don't mean like you can have like a podcast style topper and a podcast style ad, that's fine, but they can't be in the same setting and they can't have the same people in them. It really has to be like the way to make this the most successful is like have the format be really different. So if, we have 2 females in a really casual, like comedy podcast style setting, and then the expert and a host in a much more formal interview style setting. Those work really well because you have some likeness because it's like two people talking to each other, but you have so much differentiation because the style is different, like the vibe, the people you're looking at are so different. I'd say that's the main thing. What you don't want to do is just like have the same person who's in the main ad just also talking to camera as the topper. I don't think that works nearly as well. Here's an example. So we had this one topper that did really well for this offer, and it was this car back and forth type skit. And, he was playing in one hand like this old, fat, tired man. In the other hand, he's like really jacked dude. And he's playing both parts, and it's kind of funny. And then it goes into an ad that follows the exact mechanism they set up. And we did a few versions of that ad. One version had like a completely different talent reciting the script. And that's the one we really scaled. And then when that kind of started to fatigue, we had a version with the guy who was in the skit also doing the full ad. And we ran that for a little bit. But that didn't scale nearly as well because of the fact that, like, in this case, you actually don't want congruence. You want that differentiation. The congruence also makes it feel a little too contrived. Whereas when you've got like a skit, that's one thing, and then like a totally different person doing the ad, that's something else. I think it works just because it's so different. And I think people get tired of seeing that same person for, 4 minutes as opposed to 45 seconds.
Yeah. Well, if you're lending credibility, if that's the power of a topper is lending credibility, it hurts when you're lending credibility to yourself.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to talk about like the kill decision frameworks because we've talked about things scaling. We've talked about things going big. We've talked about how toppers took an ad, forget how many X fold that you said, but it spent, what'd you say, 300K?
Yeah, that one spent 300K, just like one new topper on one.
Yeah, just add in a topper. But the kill decision frameworks of like when things go bad, like we've all experienced something that we thought was going to work and we don't want to give up on it. What are the factors that you consider either when dropping a specific angle or concept that you're going after on the creative side or even on the offer side? And I know those are two vastly different answers, but let's just dive into those two buckets.
Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with creative since we're transitioning off of creative.
Okay, so cool. So like when killing a creative, I feel like you're not ever really killing it. You're just kind of putting it down for a nap for a little while. Because if you have a creative fatigue, no, and again, like, I don't know, I'm talking cliches today for some reason. End of day and too much caffeine, I think. But okay, so with creative, right, like you can have an ad that runs really long and you'll spend $1 million above whatever the client's target ROAS is. And that's great. And then it fatigues for 2 weeks. That doesn't mean it's dead. It just means the audience is a little bit tired of it. And, our audience has, so here's the thing. People have the memories of goldfish. So put it to sleep for 6 months.
Yeah. Like we all love zombie campaigns. Like it dies out and then you resurrect it and it comes back and it kills. But I'm thinking specifically of something that like team loves it. Seems like a good idea. The research indicates that we should be going after this. We launched some creatives around this and it's lackluster. It's like, barely there or not quite there, but we want to give it another shot. So we give it another shot, we iterate on it, or, we write again on that Angular concept, net new scripts. However we go about it, we continue attacking that. And, that cycle continues. Like, do you have a thing of like, oh, this creative is so weak that we're not even going to touch it anymore? Or is it like, oh yeah, it's kind of limping along. We want to try and resurrect it, or we want to try and like, do it a different way so that it can get the scale that we think it deserves because the research indicates this should resonate really well or something like that. I'm thinking of from the perspective of fresh creative and not something that's dying out.
Okay. So there's actually like 3 things we can talk about. So, okay. First off, sometimes when we launch a net new, like it just bombs the first week and then all of a sudden it takes off in the second week. And I think that has to do with just Meta sometimes cannot find the right audience for that creative. And then once it does, so I think part of this is just having the discipline to know, hey, like we're going to have a few bad days. Sometimes the discipline is not in killing it right away. Sometimes the discipline is being like, we need to hold on a little bit longer. So that's one aspect of that. The second aspect of that is about aligning incentives. So if a copywriter really feels strongly about this one ad idea, because of the way like our incentives are structured, like they're not going to want to write for something that's bombing, because at the end of the day, we all get paid on performance. So they're not going to waste time when they have other winners they can focus on if this thing is not showing the results. So if they really feel strongly about it, they can keep working on it, but like they're going to self-regulate. And I typically let them self-regulate. I'd let them, like, I don't have any control. I don't have any power over anybody. I just have opinions. But the reason why I kind of leave the writers to their own devices is because if they're really enthusiastic and confident about something, they're going to do a better job of writing. If they have a great idea and no enthusiasm about that idea, then their end product's probably not going to be that good. But if they have an idea that might be, mediocre, but they're really confident, their execution might be able to take that over the top. And again, because they're incentivized on performance, like they'll self-regulate. They'll give it 2 or 3 kicks at the can, and they're not going to keep working on that at the expense of everything else. We're all adults here. So that's the second. And then the other part was like just letting Facebook sometimes give it a little bit more time.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So that's the creative side of it. What about an offer? What about whether, it's, we talked about launches and how they're different from, bringing someone on that already has a funnel live, and we're just trying to optimize it and help them scale. So on either of those fronts, how long are you working on something before you're making a decision to like, this really isn't going to work?
So that's an actually really interesting question, because there's so many different parties you have to consider in that decision, right? At the end of the day, the team that I run has limited amounts of resources. We have several offers we're running. So we want to put our offers into the campaigns that have into the offers that have the most potential to scale sustainably. Meaning that we don't just take them up and then they die. We take them up and we keep them at like a high level for a long period of time. So that's the number one thing we want to prioritize. So that factors into the decision. Something else that factors into the decision is obviously like the company as a whole, right? We are a company. That means we are a business. We try to make money. So we have targets to meet. But then the other part of it is the client, right? And I never want to disrespect the client's money, the client's time. So in coming to the decision of when to kill an offer, it's really a matter of factoring in the resources we have available. If we don't have the resources available within the team to really, really push on cracking an offer, if the data doesn't, if the client has given us a lot of time already and we haven't been able to do it, then we want to show respect to them. And then obviously like there's, decisions above my head that I have to take into consideration as well. So there's all 3 factors. One example of an offer we decided to kill, I don't know how much detail I can get, so we can just edit out stuff that I might not be allowed to say. It was a beauty product. Affiliates were also running to it. Our CPMs for some reason were like $300 when like standard for that industry is 100. So they were triple. We could not get them down no matter what we did. We changed domains. We completely changed the videos. We ran like clean ads, like image ads, which always have way lower CPMs. Like nothing worked. The CPMs were just sky high. Personally, I think they just got like blacklisted like crazy by Meta. And they just like, so anything with that in their name, any domain that had those 2 words in their name were just blacklisted. The only thing we didn't try, which now I think we might have, is like running to a pre-lander, but that's what all their affiliates were doing anyway. So like we wouldn't have been doing anything differently at that point. But the main thing there was, we put in like probably 2 to 3 months of trying to crack those CPMs and we could not get them down. And at that point, it's like, you also want to respect the client. Like, hey, they're still paying us to do this. But at some point we have to say like, hey, it's not a good use of your money if we can't solve this problem. We're really good at certain things. And I'd say, we're probably some of the best in the industry at certain things we do, but we're not the best at everything. And so sometimes we have to say like, hey, look, at the end of the day, as an agency, we are a fiduciary for your offer. And that means we have to give you the advice on what the best decision is for the well-being of that offer. And sometimes that is, you have to take it somewhere else. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. You had to have that tough conversation of someone wanting us to continue, and you and the team have made the tough decision that it's time to kill it. We've done all we can. We can't keep prioritizing resources to something that just keeps failing. And, the client wants us to keep going. And if you have had that conversation, how do you approach that?
So with that specific situation, like it was a much more mutual decision. Like we'd kind of been talking about it, and we were like, hey, we're going to try these 3 things. But like at the end of the day, if these don't work, then like it's probably not something we're going to be able to crack at this point in time with the resources we have available. And everyone was okay with that. Like everyone's really, like I said, one of the things I love about
clients are usually pretty understanding. If you bring them data that says, hey, you're losing money, you want to stop doing that. Yeah.
Usually, sometimes they can be like a little unreasonable and be like, no, please keep taking our money. And we're like, we don't want it. We're not, like, you're just going to keep throwing it down a well, which doesn't happen often. Usually we solve the problem. But like every once in a while, like, you run into a situation like that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, one of the things I love about TNT is that we have such sophisticated clients. So they're very mature and they know how the game is played. And so typically we don't have crazy conversations. We don't no one's yelling at each other. No one's acting unreasonable. Like we're all very adult. And that was exactly one of those conversations.
Except for all the children that we have working for us. No, I'm kidding.
We don't talk about the child labor. Kira's unpaid little ones that are video editing instead of doing homework.
I am just wondering, what you are excited to focus on in 2026. And you can answer it whatever comes to mind.
So the thing that's actually got me really excited is, so 2 things, and 2 very different things. Number 1, I'm really on the train that content is good, like branded content is going to be the key, even in direct response. And so the thing we're working on with a few of our offers is creating a series, like a video content series that has like no CTA, that's not ad driven, that's all just like knowledge and value sharing, that we'll still be running paid, like we'll still be running traffic to, in order to like create large warm audiences that we then show our direct response ads to. Because I think worst case scenario, what happens there is our CPMs get lowered because we built up a retargeting audience. And I think best case scenario, what happens is our CPAs plummet and our ROAS goes through the roof. And I think we'll end up probably closer to like 80% of the high goal, like the best case scenario, than we are closer to the worst case. And I think in either case, it's worth the investment. So that's something I'm really excited about, that we're working on with a couple of offers. The other thing I'm really excited about is, given the Andromeda update, Meta is really prioritizing creative diversification, which means new faces, new visuals, things it's never seen before. So I'm really excited about AI's ability to do both custom avatars, which are starting to get more and more realistic, and also custom B-roll. And I think both of those things, which frankly, we might want to edit this out because I think that's going to be the secret sauce that really takes us to the next level in 2026. But like implementing custom B-roll and having our own libraries that no one else across the industry is using is going to give us a massive advantage with Meta that no one else will have. And I'm calling the shot here.
Love it. I'm excited about it too.
So rapid fire closer here. What's the one thing brands and brand operators think matters, but it actually doesn't?
Your brand. When you're at low spend, when you're at low scale, your brand doesn't matter because no one knows who you are.
Yeah.
The only person who cares is you.
Oh, man. I love that one because I hear that often with people who are at the low scale. They're still at the low scale, and you can tell they're still at the low scale because they're trying to preserve their brand. It's like, it does not matter. You need to test and you need to find what resonates and you need to push until brand actually does matter, where people recognize you. But when you're, anyway, that's a great one, man. Good answer.
Every company has, I mean, most big beloved brands that they all did some shady shit in the beginning. So stop being precious. Stop pretending like, you're above our evil direct response ways of getting customers. You're not.
Yeah. Well, I always, there's big brands in the industry that definitely started out as direct response brands. And I always parallel it with the Kennedy story, like the Kennedy family made their money on bootlegging. And it's like, then they became politicians and presidents, and
that story's not the best analogy because it ends with getting your head blown off. but
You're thinking of one person. I'm talking about the entire family. Ooh, yeah, you're right. But anyway, man, Sohail, it's been awesome interviewing you, hearing more about the day-to-day of performance, some of your biggest wins, some of the frameworks that you're using as you run some of the biggest traffic at the agency. I hope people got some value out of this episode. And if you did, leave us a comment below. If you're interested in seeing future episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new episodes drop. But that's it. And Sohail, thanks again. Great having you.
Thank you.
thank you guys. Really appreciate being here.